I'm John Heilemann.
And I'm Mark Halperin. With all due respect to Mississippi, if you're having trouble figuring out what to do with your state flag, there's actually a fair amount of consensus.
It should be taken down and placed in a museum.
Belongs in a museum.
It's time to put it in a museum.
Or in a museum.
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 It belongs in a museum.
Oh, boy.
On the show tonight, Rand, ransom, and arithmetic, but first, Rodham, Clinton Hillary. This afternoon near Ferguson, Missouri, the Democratic presidential hopeful hosted a community meeting at a black church and spoke emotionally about race relations in America and in detail for the first time about the Confederate flag.
Despite our best efforts and our highest hopes, America's long struggle with race is far from finished. We can't hide from hard truths about race and justice. We have to name them and own them and change them. That's why I appreciate the actions begun yesterday by the governor and other leaders of South Carolina to remove the Confederate battle flag from the State House. Recognizing it as a symbol of our nation's racist past that has no place in our present or our future. It shouldn't fly there. It shouldn't fly anywhere.
So, John, even before those strong remarks today, Hillary Clinton has been getting rave reviews. The New York Times said she was, quote, at the forefront of the discussions about race here. That's the first time she talked about the flag after Nikki Haley acted. My question for you, on these matters, has she been a profile in courage or a profile in expediency?
Well, yesterday, when George Pataki was coming out and being very clear and saying the flag had to come down yesterday around lunchtime, Eastern time, the Clinton campaign was communicating to Bloomberg Politics, citing things that she had said back in 2007, because she hadn't come out and made a forthright statement. This was very powerful. It was very strong. But she's not been in the forefront, I don't think, on this specific issue. No one doubts her commitment to racial equality in America. But on this issue, not in the leadership, I don't think.
No, and lots of people now are talking about the flag and how great it was when Nikki Haley did. But Secretary Clinton, this debate's been engaged since last week. She's she's handling this well overall, and I think she's speaking from her heart, and she always does well when she does that. Right. But to give her credit for speaking out on the flag when they would not speak out when it was dangerous, I think is
crazy.
Too much.
There were dozens of people last Friday saying exactly it had to come down, had to come down, had to come down. She was not. That just means she's not in the forefront under any circumstance. Can you claim that?
Yeah.
Rand Paul has been on vacation and hadn't commented on the flag controversy at all until today. Hadn't said a word. In an interview with Boston's WRKO Radio, Paul today finally joined the chorus.
I think the flag is inescapably a symbol of human bondage and slavery, and particularly when people use it, obviously for murder and to justify hatred so vicious that you would kill somebody. I think that symbolism needs to end. I think South Carolina's doing the right thing. There have been people who used it for Southern pride and heritage and all of that, but really I think every African American in the country, it's a symbolism of slavery to them. And now it's a symbol of murder for this young man.
So Rand Paul has spoken out for inclusiveness in the party as much as any Republican 2016er, and yet he was really the last one to come out with this kind of statement, a very strong statement. So do you think that is a profile in courage, or the same question as Hillary Clinton, a little bit late to a consensus that's already left the station?
I understand he was on vacation, but this was a national tragedy. I think he could have written and approved a statement. Those words are striking. That's about as strong a statement as I've heard almost anybody make,
left or right.
And so I applaud him for coming out now, but truly, waiting till after Nikki Haley dealt with it, I think, again, I applaud what he's doing now. I applaud the strength and passion, but I think he could have come off vacation to write those paragraphs and put out a statement.
For sure. This was a big deal, and it's supposed to be part of his brand. As I said, he's supposed to be about a more inclusive Republican Party. He's supposed to be reaching out to minority communities. This should have been, just in terms not just of courage, but in terms of political consistency with the brand he's trying to project, he should have been at the forefront. And again, Nice to hear these words, not at the forefront.
Being behind Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, Lindsey Graham, and all those legislators in South Carolina, and Ryan Priebus.
George Pataki.
It's all well and good. But again, this is a time of national moment of asking people to step forward and lead and not hide behind states' rights. I would have been great for him to hear that earlier. I don't know that he'll pay a political price for it by any means, but it does show that for a lot of people, including Haley Barbour on Morning Joe this morning, this is still a fraught issue that some people think is too dangerous to lead on. Yeah. All right, so Jeb Bush and the issue of education. Strength or weakness? In an op-ed in the New York Post today, Bush went on offense, rapping the knuckles of two New Yorkers, Hillary Clinton and New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, focusing on the issue of school choice. Jeb's shop also put out a video related to the op-ed, touting his own record on that matter.
Governor Jeb Bush instituted the first voucher program in the United States to give low-income kids an opportunity to go to a private school.
If it hadn't been for Jeb Bush, I don't know where she would have been at today.
By him having a passion for education, he made all of that possible. I think he can make a real difference in the lives of kids.
Not a lot of Jeb Bush op-eds in the New York Post in general. Why is he taking up after Hillary Clinton now on this issue?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in this issue, and I will do it together. Let's start with the first thing, which is that education is a weakness for him in the Republican nomination fight because of Common Core. So he wants to change the subject aggressively to the voucher system, which is a favorite of conservatives. He wants to talk voucher, voucher, voucher. That's point one.
Well, where he has been the most conservative, successful education reformer in the country in the last 25 years. Point two is he needs to show people he'll take up after Hillary Clinton because of the closest, and I think he wants to do that. And I'll say it's point three, then you can do four. Point three is he wants to show voters he cares about education. His brother fought and won on the issue of education, helped him a lot in the general election.
And point four, who is a riper target in the Republican politics than Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York City? Yeah. He's the bête noir of the Republican Party now. He's seen as almost more socialist than Bernie Sanders, and so you got a free shot here at de Blasio along the way, and links up Hillary Clinton to de Blasio.
Every Republican who wants to be the nominee has to answer the question: how can you get more women votes than Mitt Romney got, than John McCain got? And education for Republicans is a tough issue, but if you succeed on it, you can get suburban women and other women in a way that few other issues allow.
And again, to give Jeb credit in this sense, he's, that's a general election message. That's a message. It's not just a primary message, although it works in the primary, but it's also a general election message. He's doing that. All right, President Obama is reportedly about to change a controversial policy related to kidnappings abroad. The government, the U.S. government, will no longer threaten Americans with criminal prosecution if they try to pay ransom for family members held hostage by groups like ISIS. Also, Obama will say that while the government can communicate with captors in an effort to return hostages safely, there will be no change to the longstanding American policy against making concessions to hostage takers. So, Mark, very simple question. Smart policy change or dangerously dumb?
Totally appreciate the impulse behind this. It's the kind of thing Barack Obama loves to try to solve, and I know he's been touched by the families whose members have been taken hostage. I think this is a mistake. I think it gets us on a slippery slope to negotiation. Some aspects of it, like keeping the families better informed, great. Not threatening with prosecution is fine, but I think it puts the U.S. on a slippery slope to be like Europe and some Asian countries, sends the wrong message to terrorists.
I think, look, I mean, this policy is a policy change in some sense not. It's never really been against the rules for families to try to negotiate with hostage takers. There's been confusion about it. It's been confusingly applied. Nobody really knows what the rules are. I applaud him for clarity here, right? Families should know what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, and it certainly should be the case that no one should go to jail for trying to get one of their family members who's held hostage abroad. No one should go to jail for that or be threatened with going to jail for that. So I'm with him on that.
The one thing that I think is good about this is the president had a full discussion within the government. There are parts of it that I still think are too confusing. I'm worried about the slippery slope. But this is a thing in the post 9/11 era that was never dealt with. It needs to be dealt with because there's going to be more Americans.
And I want more clarity on the second part, which is they can have conversations, but can they negotiate? If they're not making concessions, that's good. But the negotiation thing's a little worrying.
Up next, the mayor of the great city of Atlanta, Kasim Reed, after this word from our sponsors.
We're here today with with the mayor of Atlanta, Kasim, one of the most prominent African-American officials in the country. Kasim, and from our Atlanta bureau, good to see you. There's obviously been a lot of discussion about race in America over the course of the last few days, in particular with the decision in South Carolina to take down the Confederate flag. Georgia resolved this issue back in 2001. Give us a sense of how you felt about and how you experienced this debate and the decision yesterday in your neighboring state.
Well, first of all, I think Governor Haley deserved a great deal of appreciation for the courageous act she made. I know a little bit about it. I was one of the leaders of the effort to change the flag in Georgia with Governor Perdue as governor, and we successfully put to bed the most controversial part of the flag here. It's going to be a long, tough process. I think Governor Haley and the leaders in South Carolina are definitely doing the right thing at this moment and for the state long term. It's time to put the Confederate flag to bed in South Carolina, but it's going to be very difficult, tough, and I anticipate some very, very emotional debates unless things have changed more than I think they have.
In South Carolina, and I'm sure in Georgia, there are claims that that the Confederate flag is a symbol of heritage and not of hate. What do you say to people who say that, who make that argument?
I would say that the hate is overwhelming. And the fact of the matter is for most people, the Confederate flag is a symbol of hate, and for those who feel that it's a symbol of heritage, there's a place for that in museums throughout the state of Georgia and throughout the state of South Carolina. So you're able to pay homage to relatives or folks that have affection or appreciation for that flag. But the overwhelming feeling in Georgia when we changed our flag here in South Carolina and Mississippi and in other places is that it is a powerful symbol of hate, and I think that that is why things are moving as they are. That argument, candidly, simply does not hold muster anymore, and I think that's being borne out by how rapidly this is moving.
Do you think that the Republican Party, Mr. Mayor, has a problem with this issue, or do you think that at this point, if South Carolina goes ahead and brings the flag down, the state legislature goes in the direction that the governor is urging, that the party, which has obviously has rallied on this case, in this case, but in the past has had tended to be more in favor of the heritage argument? Do you think this is going to be an issue that's going to continue to be debated, and the Republicans are going to have to answer for going forward into 2016?
Well, I think it's going to play out on the Republican primary side. I think that you're already seeing difficulty among the candidates in coming down on a firm position, and their position candidly has been evolving. And I think as they go through the primary process, folks are going to try to thread the needle. Some of them will, and then some of them will come out decisively. I think Senator Graham was by Governor Haley's side and do the right thing long term. It's very important, in my opinion, that the Republican Party be absolute and totally committed in this effort. And we're going to have several weeks as this plays out. And I think that the debate in the legislature, if it's anything like what we went through in Georgia, is going to be a very powerful and passionate debate as both sides mobilize around the issue. But I think that the Republican Party has to stand firm on the right side of this as a party.
Mr. Mayor, let me ask you, yesterday there was a bit of a media hubbub when an interview that President Obama did with Mark Maron out in L.A. Was released. He used an ugly racial epithet, or invoked it in the context of discussing the persistence of racism in America. I'm curious as to, one, whether you understand why the president used that word. Number two, what you think about the hubbub, and whether you think, and thirdly, whether you think that media organizations are right or wrong to let the president have that word used on the air, or whether they should have, as some did, bleep it out.
I think that the president was having a teaching moment and was being very candid with the American people, and I think it was appropriate for him to use the word in the context he did. And what he was doing was just drawing attention to the fact that many folks that believe that by being polite and not using language such as the language that he used, that we're making real progress on issues regarding race and class. And so I thought it was an appropriate use of the word, and I thought that the response to it, certainly coming from President Obama, was overblown, and that we're all well aware that a number of American presidents in private have used that word before, and I thought the way that he was using it was clearly a teaching moment and as a part of an honest conversation.
Mr. Mayor, finally, as a close observer of your party and the party's presidential nominating process, why is Bernie Sanders drawing such big crowds and moving up a little bit in the polls?
I think he's drawing big crowds because he sounds like a populist, and he has a very strong record that backs up the things that he says. And I think that that everybody wants to give Secretary Clinton a bit of a workout. The presidency of the United States is a special and sacred thing. And I don't believe that even within the Democratic Party that folks want there to be a feeling that you're not out there earning it and fighting for it. They're going to make Secretary Clinton earn it, and she's going to do that.
All right, Mayor Reed, let me ask you real quick, yes or no, is Georgia going to be in play in 2016? Just one word answer, yes or no? In play. Okay.
Yes.
Mayor Kasim Reed, thank you so much for coming on the show. When we come back, a rapper, an Elvis impersonator, and an attorney general all in one. Utah's Sean Reyes is here. We'll be right back.
Because I rhyme with style. Yes, I reign supreme. I'm the real educated rapper, rhyming connoisseur, and vocabulary master.
That was in San Diego, where I met our next guest, the Attorney General of Utah, Sean Reyes, who is a master of everything, as we discussed. Thanks for coming here.
Thanks a lot, Mark. It's great to be on.
We're hoping to get you to rap a little bit more later in the show. But first, we want to talk some legal stuff with you. The Attorney General of Utah, and obviously you follow national issues. We want to talk about two Supreme Court cases that are coming any day now. First, on same-sex marriage. That's been fought out in your state and lots of other states. How do you handicap what the court is facing and what you think they'll decide?
Obergefell. It's a difficult decision for the court. Most people believe that Justice Kennedy is the swing vote on that. He gave us a decision in Windsor that seemed to sort of reflect that inner conflict that he had. Will he hew back to his more federalist roots and allow the states to decide this issue as they have traditionally? Or will he, as a lot of his language indicated, vote to universally recognize same-sex marriage, not just at a federal level, but through all the states? You know, all the prognosticators seem to, the experts seem to think that the likelihood is a 5-4 decision one way or the other. So I don't know.
If we end up with if Justice Kennedy goes the way that some prognosticators think, and we end up with national right to same-sex marriage, do you have any doubt in your mind that every state in the union must then follow what the Supreme Court says? There are some people who suggest that there are ways in which the states could fight back against that, beyond the question of a constitutional amendment.
You know, we've addressed this in our state, and we're ready, whatever the decision is, to implement the law that the Supreme Court pronounces. However, I will say this, too, regardless of how it turns out, and particularly if they rule against the states and against the Sixth Circuit, I think the next question will be then how do you balance the religious freedoms? There have been, our own state has addressed that through legislation to try to strike that balance in anticipation of a SCOTUS decision perhaps going against the states.
The other big decision everybody's waiting for is on the Affordable Care Act, the question of state subsidies for people with federal exchanges. Your state doesn't have a state exchange, so it would affect a lot of people in Utah if it's struck down. How do you handicap the court's decision there, and what are the implications, you think, if they strike down the subsidies?
Once again, and I don't want to sound just like a lawyer, but these are very nuanced decisions. I think the plain text of the Act makes it very difficult for the courts to ignore that they excluded coverage for federal-funded exchanges. However, I have a sense that perhaps at the end of the day, the court may find that there is some ambiguity, and in that ambiguity they can interpret that if they were intended to cover state exchanges, they were also intended to cover federal exchanges.
This is an oversimplification of the case, but if you've got on one side the simple language, and the other side you've got what appeared to be the legislative intent, and you've got the interpretation by the agency, the IRS, in question. Does that trump the simple language, or not necessarily?
You know, by interpretation, statutory interpretation, it really shouldn't. It should be the plain language that is always the first thing that you go to. But as you posit it, Mark, when you factor in the intent or the purported intent along with sort of the interpretation at the agency level, again, that's why it's making it hard for everyone to determine which way it goes. I believe also 5-4.
Right. Let me ask you a question about John Roberts, obviously instrumental in the first Obamacare case, upset a lot of conservatives who had hopes that he would be a true blue or true red conservative. Do you think, what's your view of how Chief Justice Roberts has comported himself in that hallowed position?
You know, we always hope that whomever's on the bench will put aside their own personal feelings or perhaps even partisan leanings to do what they believe is right under the law. I don't really want to come here to second-guess Chief Justice Roberts on any particular decision, but that is the hope. Can they do it? Are they insulated truly from politics and popular feelings?
Let me put it this way: do you think has his jurisprudence been in line with what you expected, or not?
No, I think he surprised some people. Clearly, I believe those on the conservative side felt like that was a vote that should have been a Roberts vote, and he went the other way. And I think many of them are hoping that in this case he, I don't want to use the term glibly, pays them back, that he returns back to where they think he ought to be. But again, he's proven that he's his own man, and that he'll make decisions that he believes are in the best interest and interpreted true to the Constitution.
Biggest difference, quick answer, between Utah and New York City?
Biggest difference between Utah and New York City, we have mountains that are gigantic and beautiful scenery, and we passed a...
We got three-card Monty.
You do. We may have some of that, too.
You're trying to say New Jersey's not beautiful?
Well, no, what I'd like to say is Utah has a new white-collar fraud registry that no state has, so that way I know I'm on safe ground.
All right,
this is interesting stuff.
John Reyes, Attorney General of the great state of Utah. When we come back, we've got some sort of musical number. Could be Elvis, could be rapping, I don't know.
Wow.
Right after this.
In case you didn't know, our guest, Sean Reyes, is an Elvis man. And on the other end of the spectrum, he also loves hip-hop. Sean, we hear you've got a new jam about your job. So, MCAG, what do you got?
Because I'm the devastating, innovating, rhyming AG, repping 801 Utah SLC. Don't waste your time trying to battle me, because I knock you out. You're Frazier, I'm Ali. Yes, Ali, a.k.a. Cassius Clay. You want to take my title, best step away. Political pugilist, I don't play. You feeling lucky? Come on and make my day. Because like a rope-a-dope, give you hope, take your best hits. I'll leave it standing there. When I'm standing there smiling, boy, you know I'm legit. And that's it.
That's good. Not since Ed Meese have we had an AG rap on this show. Welcome. All right. You see us tomorrow here at 5 p.m. Bobby Jindal announcement day. Right after that, live coverage of the announcement that he's running for president. Also, Bernie Sanders booked on Thursday. Until then, thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Sayonara.
Thank you very much.